Chapter 1. 7 on the Shore. The sea howled like a wounded animal as it crashed against the rocks of the Yorkshire coast. Above the gray waves loomed Langton Hall, a gloomy, massive mansion carved from the darkness itself. Here, in the mist and rain, Professor Harvey Langton was going to receive guests, 7 people he had not seen for more than 10 years. 7 people bound by a secret that each of them would prefer to forget forever. The storm had been raging for 3 days. The bridge over the river had been washed away, the telephone line was down, and the only way to the mansion was along a narrow coastal road that was about to flood. In the library with a crackling fireplace, the professor stood at the window. In the reflection of the glass, his thin face with its aquiline nose and piercing eyes seemed like a ghost. He held a letter in his hand, a scrap of paper life, worn from repeated reading. On it, they must pay, all 7 of them, to the last one. He folded the letter slowly and put it in the fireplace. The flames greedily took their victim. "Let them come," he whispered. "This time no one will leave without paying." Soon there was the first knock at the door. Mrs. Banks, the housekeeper, opened it, and a man in an overcoat, soaking wet, with a short graying beard and a cane, entered. "Mr. Evans," he introduced himself. "I am glad to be here, although it is not a kind time for meetings." The professor greeted him with a dry smile. "Time, Mr. Evans, is never kind. It only takes. Come in." The guests arrived one after another. All of them were participants in that very 1927 expedition to Egypt, where the young Egyptologist Edward Mason died in strange circumstances in the sands of Giza. His death was then considered an accident, but the professor knew that accidents do not happen when the stakes are so high. Sir Roger Belford, an arrogant gentleman with a military bearing. Madame Helen Muriel, a French widow with a gaze as cold as ice. Richard Sloane, a nervous archaeologist who became a collector. Dr. Lydia Hull, a woman with yellow eyes and a voice of snake-like confidence. Harry Stemp, a fat man with a heavy gaze, a former journalist. And finally, Miss Joanna Lake, a sweet-looking governess, but with her hands always hidden in gloves. 7 people. 8 with the professor. The 9th was the servant Thomas, silent, lame, and long devoted to his master. Supper was laid on the dining room table. Meat baked with rosemary, potatoes, wine. But the guests' appetites were sluggish. Too much remained unsaid. The professor stood up. "I am glad to see you all. Much has changed over the years, but there are things that cannot be forgotten. I am sure you understand why you are here." Silence. He grinned. "Tomorrow morning I will have a surprise for you." He looked at Mr. Evans. Their eyes met for a moment. The professor knew who he really was, and he already felt the end approaching. And outside the window the wind lashed the mansion as if someone wanted to get inside and destroy everything. Chapter 2. The Ghost of the Expedition. Night fell upon Langton Hall with the weight of a century's sleep. The clock in the hall struck 2, but sleep came to none of the guests. The wind moaned through the walls, the beams creaked, and the coals crackled in the old fireplace, as if whispering something hidden. In the library, the only warm place in the house, Mr. Evans sat in an armchair with a glass of brandy. His cane stood nearby, carefully leaning against the leg of the table. He watched the others carefully. Behavior, gestures, words. Sir Roger smoked his pipe silently, blowing rings of smoke toward the ceiling. His fingers trembled, although he tried to hide it. "You remember what it was like," Harry Stemp said at last, pouring himself another whiskey. "The heat, the silence, those damned statues with their faces like they were alive. And the sand," Richard Sloane put in. "It was everywhere, even in the teeth. And the main thing is the feeling," Lydia Hull spoke slowly, "as if someone was watching all the time. Everyone looked at each other. No one mentioned his name, but it was in the air. Edward Mason. Young, brilliant, naive. He had joined the expedition last. Passionate, in love with antiquity, he believed that he would uncover the truth hidden behind the centuries. And he uncovered his own grave. "Remind me, how exactly did he die?" Mr. Evans asked, sipping brandy. His voice was casual, but his eyes did not blink. "An accident," Sir Roger answered quickly. "A landslide in the tomb. We were deep in the tunnels then. No one had time to help." "And the body?" Silence. "We couldn't get it out," Joanna Lake said quietly. "The sand filled everything. We barely got out ourselves." Madame Muriel sighed. "He was too young, too pure." She took a sip of wine. "And he knew too much." The phrase hung in the air like a shadow. "Do you think he died because he knew something unnecessary?" Mr. Evans clarified. "I think," Lydia Hull whispered, "that it wasn't the sand that killed him." The silence was long. Thunder rumbled outside. A door slammed somewhere above. Mr. Evans stood up and picked up his cane. "Excuse me, I must examine the room." Just a premonition. He left the library and headed down the corridor. His footsteps echoed dully on the carpet. The mansion was a tangle of corridors, suites of rooms, and old portraits watching from under their brows. He stopped at the professor's office. The door was ajar. Inside, silence. On the table lay papers, books, a compass, a small silver scarab, and a photograph. Old, faded. A group of people against the backdrop of a pyramid. 7. But on the back, through the faded ink, was an inscription. 7 entered. 8 left. 1 is still there. Evans frowned. 8, he whispered. He did not hear the click of the lock behind him. Someone closed the door. Chapter 3. A shot in the night. The shot rang out suddenly. Short, sharp, like the crack of a whip. The walls of the mansion shook, and a scream rang through the house. It came from the throat of the housekeeper, Mrs. Banks, who, by an evil coincidence, was at that moment carrying a tray of tea into the study. The fine china crashed to the floor, breaking into 1,000 white fragments. In a moment, everyone was awake. Heavy footsteps, voices, panic. Lake was screaming. Stemp was running, tangling in his dressing gown. Sir Roger was already holding the pistol, as if it were under his pillow. Mr. Evans came out of his room into the corridor just as the others ran to the professor's study. The door was locked from the inside. "He fired," cried Mrs. Banks. "I heard it. One shot." "Let me go," said Evans, pushing them all aside. He knelt down and peered through the keyhole. "The key is there, from the inside." "Then it's suicide," said Harry Stemp hoarsely. "Or a trap. Or a theater," added Lydia coldly. Evans rose. "Thomas, the ladder." Out the window. A few minutes later a servant brought the ladder, and Evans, by the light of a lantern, climbed up to the second floor to the study window. It was not only closed, it was boarded up from the inside. Boards nailed down. A ghost of fear crossed his face. He forced open the frame, breaking out a board, and climbed inside. The study smelled of gunpowder. Professor Langton was sitting at his desk, leaning slightly to one side. There was a neat bloody dot in his temple. In his hand was a revolver. On the table in front of him was a note, written in a trembling hand. "They came. They took what was mine. Forgive me, Edward." Evans frowned. The paper was too clean. The handwriting was too neat for a man in a panic. And most importantly, the professor was left-handed, and the revolver was in his right hand. He checked the door from the inside. The lock was intact. The key was in the keyhole. A closed room, locked from the inside. A boarded-up window. A corpse with a gun in his hand. And a lie. All this screamed of forgery. Evans opened the door, and the others rushed into the room. One by one, Their eyes fell on the body. Suicide, Stemp said again. Obviously, obviously, Joanna whispered. Only that the professor is no longer with us. You forget, Evans looked at them. He suspected one of you. And he invited you for a reason. He knew that they would come for him. Lydia crossed her arms. And you, Mr. Evans, who exactly? You are too clever and commanding. Evans smiled slightly, but did not answer. He looked at Langton's body again. Under the professor's feet was a scrap of burnt paper. He picked it up. On it was only one line, barely discernible. The eye sees only what it wants. Chapter 4. Mr. Evans speaking. You must all stay, Evans said as Professor Langton's body was carried away and the study door slammed behind the limping Thomas. No one leaves this house until the matter is cleared up. No carriage will pass along the road. The bridge is washed away. The telephones are silent. We are cut off. He stood by the fireplace, his hands on his cane. His eyes were calm. The others, on the contrary, shifted nervously from one foot to the other, as if each of them already sensed that he might be next. Excuse me, but who are you to give orders? Sir Roger snapped. We are not being interrogated. That is true, Evans said calmly. But now you must know, my name is not Evans. My name is Charles Gray, a private detective. I was hired by Professor Langton 2 weeks ago. He received a threatening letter. Anonymous. It contains only a photograph of the expedition and a line. Soon you will be the 8th. He paused, looking at them. He suspected one of you. That's why he invited you here, to, as he put it, finish an old case. Silence. Each seemed to be trying to hide inside his own shadow. This is ridiculous, Sloane said through gritted teeth. What kind of childish games are these? This is no longer a game, the detective said coldly. One man is dead, and I am sure it is not suicide. He pulled the professor's note from his pocket. He pointed to it. See? The handwriting is shaky, but too even. The ink is almost unsmudged. And the revolver is in his right hand. Langton was left-handed. Someone killed him and then staged a suicide. But how? The door was locked from the inside. Joanna objected. That's exactly what I'm trying to find out. He paced the room. Let's start with the simple stuff. You were all together in Egypt, on the expedition of 1927. Edward Mason died then, and I think the professor believed to the end of his life that it was no accident. Lydia Hull narrowed her eyes. You mean to say that one of us killed him? No, Grace said. I mean that one of you knew he was killed, and kept quiet. Harry Stamp squeezed his glass nervously. If you want us to cooperate, Mr. Gray, he said ironically, I'd recommend less drama and more facts. Excellent, the detective responded. The first fact, the professor was killed. The second, the room was locked. The third, before he died, he told me there was a traitor among you. He was afraid he wouldn't live to see the morning. He glanced at the fireplace. There, in the ashes, something glittered. He picked up the poker and pulled out a charred coin. On it was an image of a scarab. Is this an Egyptian coin? Sloane was surprised. There were only 5 of them. We found them in the sarcophagus. I personally. And who got them? Gray interrupted. The professor. Mason. Me. Roger. And Lydia, I think. Lydia nodded without saying a word. Then the professor burned something connected with that find, the detective said. Perhaps he realized that it was the cause of Mason's death. One of you wanted it too much. Madame Muriel suddenly said, You forget one thing. There were 7 of us, but there was an Egyptian on the expedition, a young one, named Nabil. He knew the tunnels better than anyone. He disappeared the same night as Mason. Dead? Gray asked. No. Gone. Suddenly. Forever. Gray nodded. The picture was forming in his head. That night, Mason's death, Nabil's disappearance, the coins, and the professor living in fear for 10 years. "A killer is among us," he said quietly. "And he won't stop." The wind howled outside again. The house felt a little colder, as if the building itself had. The wind howled outside again. The house felt a little colder, as if the building itself had reacted to these words. Chapter 5. Sands of the Past. Egypt, 1927. The heat pulsed in the air. The sand crunched between your teeth, and the sky, whitened by the blazing sun, seemed scorched through. Langton's expedition was based 3 hours from Cairo, in the desert where an unlooted burial complex was rumored to have been found. 7 Europeans, archaeologists, sponsors, scientists, and one guide, a young Egyptian named Nabil. He was silent, agile, and seemed too smart to be a mere assistant. But it was he who led the group into those caves. There, deep in the sand, they found a secret chamber. Behind a door with an image of the god Thoth lay something more than artifacts, the burial of a royal scribe, once close to the pharaoh. He also had 5 scarab coins with him, covered in strange hieroglyphs. The professor immediately took one. The second, Mason, who was the first to recognize the inscriptions. The remaining 3 were divided among Sloane, Lydia, and Roger. That night, the wind picked up in the camp. The tents flapped. The lanterns went out. Mason did not sleep. He was excited. The inscriptions on the coins pointed to a second, hidden room, where the pen of truth was supposedly located, a legendary artifact, according to legend, capable of weighing souls. At dawn, it was not found. The sand at the entrance to the catacombs was crushed. The tracks disappeared at a crack in the rock. Langton ordered the work to continue. An accident. A day later, Nabil disappeared too. No one saw him again. And now, 10 years later, traces of the past stretched back to Langton Hall. Returning to the present, Gray opened the notebook with Langton's notes. He studied the old sketches. The page the professor had returned to shortly before his death had been crossed out, but the words were still visible. He found the artifact. "I know that. We all lied. We left him behind." Gray narrowed his eyes. If the professor believed Mason had survived, that changed a lot. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the mansion was growing darker. No one had touched their food at dinner. Only Joanna Lake, sitting quietly in the corner, watched everyone. She seemed harmless, but her eyes red, like those of a person who knew too much. "Miss Lake," Gray suddenly addressed her. "You were Mason's brother's governess, weren't you?" Everyone turned to her. "Yes," she nodded. "After that expedition, I lived with his family. His mother never forgave the professor. She said he hid something. And you?" "I heard something from my younger brother. He was a child then. Said that Edward had sent a letter before he died. It was just one line." Gray pricked up his ears. "Do you remember what it said?" Joanna said without blinking. "If I disappear, don't look for the body. Look for the truth. She's alive." The words settled in the room like sand from that distant grave. And at that moment, a second shot rang out in the hall. Gray rushed to the source. The others followed. Harry Stemp was lying on the floor. The bullet had entered his back. He was dead. But the strangest thing was that next to the body, on the floor, someone had scratched a finger in the dust. 5 to 2 equals? Chapter 6. The Death Equation. 5 minus 2 is what? Gray repeated aloud, peering at the writing on the floor. These aren't just numbers. They're a message. He stood over Harry Stamp's body. He was lying face down, as if he'd tried to crawl to the door but hadn't made it. He was clutching a quill in his hand, an old one, covered in a bronze patina. A quill that definitely didn't belong in his wardrobe. The quill of truth? Did he write this? Sloane asked, looking at the inscription in confusion. Or the murderer? That's exactly what we need to find out, Gray replied. But look, 5 minus 2. 5 coins. 2 victims. That leaves 3. He glanced around the room. The 3 people who still have the coins are you, Mr. Sloane, Sir Roger, and Miss Howell. Right. Everyone was silent. What if the killer is picking off the owners of the coins one by one? What if this is revenge? Or a ritual? Muriel whispered, lowering her voice. There is a description in the ancient texts of a rite where the souls bound to the artifact must be purified through blood before the truth is revealed. Gray nodded. Or one of you wants us to believe that there is an ancient curse behind this. A classic trick. Hide the crime behind the mask of mythology. He approached Stemp's body. He looked through the pockets. He found a bunch of keys, a letter, and no coin. Where is his scarab? Gray was surprised. He always had it with him, Lydia whispered. He even wore it on a chain under his shirt. It's not here, the detective said. So the killer took it. Sir Roger swore under his breath. Why kill and take those damned coins? What's so special about them? Perhaps, Gray said. There's something hidden in them. He took his cane from his pocket. He opened the secret compartment in the handle and showed me the coin he'd taken from the professor that night. Tiny signs showed up on its surface in the light. Hieroglyphics. But one symbol stood out, an eye with a feather inside. It's a map, he said. Or a key. To what? Joanna asked. To the truth. Gray sat up, and that's what I realized. Mason knew he'd found more than an artifact. He'd found the secret he'd been killed for. Someone in this room knew it, and they wanted to keep it a secret. Killing the professor and Stemp was an attempt to finish what they'd started. He looked at Roger. Where is your coin? In the room. In the box. Show me. Everyone headed to the rooms. The box was open. Empty. Someone stole it, Roger muttered. It was here this morning. Gray turned to Lydia. Yours? She took the locket from her neck. She opened it. The coin was there. Just don't try to steal it, she said coldly. I didn't plan to, Gray smiled. The blizzard howled in the hallway again. The doors shook. It seemed as if the house itself was shaking from the secrets it was hiding. 2 coins are missing. 2 people are dead. Someone is collecting them like keys. But why? Gray wondered. And suddenly, he turned sharply to Madame Muriel. You said that the truth will be revealed. How do you know this text? The Frenchwoman didn't blink. I read it in Mason's notes. He trusted me. We corresponded shortly before the expedition. What? Joanna exclaimed. You knew him before you went to Egypt? He was in love. Perhaps stupidly. But he wrote to me. About scarabs. About feathers. About fear. I kept those letters. Can you show them? Gray demanded. She silently went into the room. A minute later, she returned with a thin bundle of yellowed letters. Gray began to read. On the last page, a signature. If I am killed, the guilty will seek the truth. But let them know, I will return. Gray looked at everyone. He knew everything. Suddenly from the street came a knock, dull, heavy, on the door of the mansion. Gray slowly approached and opened it. A stranger in a long black cloak stood on the threshold. His face was hidden in shadow. He was silent. Who are you? Asked the detective. He raised his head, and in a voice that sent shivers down my spine, he said, I am the one you left in the sands. Chapter 7. The Returned. He stood on the threshold, a living shadow of the past. Tall, with sharply defined cheekbones, a face weathered as if from long years in the open air. His eyes were dark, tired, and in them was a knowledge that defies time. The one who said, I am the one you left in the sand. Gray was the first to break the silence. You? Nabil. That was my name, the guest answered slowly. But the man died underground 10 years ago. You left me there when everything collapsed. And I survived. The room froze. Lydia Howell clutched the back of her chair. It's impossible, she whispered. We thought you were gone, escaped. No, I was locked in. The professor and Mr. Sloan. They said, it's safer this way. And they left. 10 years of darkness, sand, and whispers. Just the artifact in me. He held out his hand, 3 scarab coins in his palm. Gray recoiled. You killed Langton and Stemp? Nabil looked down. No, but I came back when I realized the coins were back in play. One of you is killing, looking for the path to truth. But he's looking for the wrong thing. Gray frowned. What do you mean? The coins are not the key. They are seals. They cannot be collected. Otherwise, what was locked away in antiquity will return. Sir Roger laughed. What kind of obscurantism is this? Demons, curses. Do you think we're in a legend? I think you've misunderstood too much, Gray said sharply. People are dying. Someone is killing for a secret. And if not you, he looked at Nabil, then who? Nabil looked at Gray. I saw someone enter the crypt after Stemp left the dining room. I watched. It was a woman. Who? A chorus of voices rang out. I don't know. She was veiled. But when she left, the coins were gone. All eyes turned to the women. Lydia, Joanna, Muriel. This is madness, whispered Joanna. I didn't go out. And you, Madame Muriel? Gray asked. Do you have an explanation? The Frenchwoman straightened up. I'm the oldest here. Do you think I'm capable of murder? That's precisely why you're above suspicion, Gray said coolly. And this is the most convenient disguise. And, by the way, the professor's handwriting in the suicide note is very similar to yours. Muriel suddenly chuckled softly. She bowed her head. You are too smart, Mr. Gray. Everyone froze. So it was you? Lydia whispered. Yes, Muriel nodded. The professor knew. He guessed in Egypt. He found the second room, but he didn't tell me. And I found it myself. The day Mason disappeared. You killed him? No. I only wanted to take what was rightfully mine. The pen of truth. It does not give immortality, as you thought. It gives power over people, over choice, over guilt. And you continued, Gray said coldly. They killed the professor, Stemp. Only the one who was going to tell, she corrected. Stemp realized that the artifact was still here, in the mansion. I saw him looking for it. And he found it. She took a long golden feather from her bag, inlaid with turquoise and obsidian. Here it is. The feather of truth. Give it to me, Gray said. You don't understand, Muriel whispered. With it, you can find out the true essence of any person. Just ask a question, and it will show you who is guilty and who is not. She ran the feather through the air, and it vibrated as if it were alive. Ask a question, Gray said quietly. Good, she smiled. One question. Who killed Mason? She touched the feather with her finger. Slowly, silently, a name appeared on its surface. Roger Sloan. Sir Roger turned pale. He stood up abruptly. It's a lie? A lie. The artifact doesn't lie, Muriel whispered. He didn't kill? Lydia suddenly cried out. I did it. Everyone turned to her. I didn't want to. Edward. He found out that we stole the find, that we didn't give it to the museum as we promised. He threatened to tell everything. The professor wanted to throw him out, but Edward was eager to go to the press. I just wanted to stop him. The silence was harder than death. Muriel slowly lowered her pen. She was as shocked as anyone. And you, all this time, kept this secret? Lydia nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. We are all to blame, Joanna said. We kept silent. Gray took the pen from Muriel's hands. And finally the truth came out. No murders. No curses. Only the truth. He threw the feather into the fireplace. The flames leaped up, glowing turquoise. The coins followed. Let them stay there. The secrets of the desert are not for people. Chapter 8. The Price of Truth. The fire in the fireplace danced like turquoise tongues, consuming the pen of truth and the ancient coins that seemed to have lived there for an eternity. The lighting cast flickering shadows on the faces of those present. Some of them looked relieved, others depressed. Gray took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the room ease for a moment. Let the secrets of the desert remain in the sand, he said quietly. But the peace did not last long. Suddenly the house plunged into complete darkness. The power went out. The silence was pierced by a muffled knock coming from the street. Everyone froze. "Who is there?" Gray asked, trying to remain calm. From somewhere in the darkness, the answer sounded even and categorical. "None of you are worthy of the truth." A silhouette emerged from the darkness, a thin man in a black cloak, his face adorned with deep scars, apparently left by the cruel years. It was Dr. William Hart, a member of the expedition, thought to have died many years ago. You're alive?" Johanna breathed, not believing her own eyes. "Yes," Hart answered, barely holding back a smile. "I survived the desert. And now I've come to take back what was stolen from me and from all of us." All eyes turned to him, filled with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Why did you keep silent all these years?" Gray asked. "Because the truth was too dangerous," Hart answered. Mason and Professor Langton knew what that second room was hiding, but they chose to remain silent, and they paid for it with their lives. And now you're paying. He took a step forward, and his head almost touched the ceiling. Despite his thinness, there was a sense of strength in him. "You are all lying. Each one hides his share of guilt. But the truth is not just words or artifacts. The truth is what you are afraid to accept." At that moment, policemen with flashlights and weapons ran in from the window with a bright light. "Police." The loud voice of the squad captain rang out. "No one is moving." Sir Roger shuddered, and Lydia and Joanna looked at each other in despair. Gray looked at Hart. "Why didn't you go to the police earlier?" "Because no one would believe it," said Hart. "And I was afraid that the truth would be buried along with Mason and the professor." The policemen quickly began to search the mansion. "It's over," whispered Hart, looking at the assembled. "But the price of this truth is your souls." The room froze. There was a sense in everyone's eyes that the mystery was just beginning. Chapter 9. The End. The police had taken up positions throughout the mansion. Gray stood by the window, looking out at the raging snowstorm and the bright lights of the cars reflecting off the wet stones of the path. His thoughts were raging like a storm. Truth, lies, betrayal, fear. "We need to figure out who started this chain of deaths and why," he said quietly, addressing the assembled group. "And who is behind all of this?" The police captain approached Gray. "We checked the professor's room," he said. There were signs of forced entry and prints on the floor that matched Lydia Howell's. Lydia's eyes widened in shock. "I never," she began, but the words caught in her throat. "Your coin is missing," the captain continued. "Where is it?" Lydia remained silent. "Everything points to you lying," Gray said firmly. At that moment, the door burst open and Sir Roger walked into the room, his face twisted with anger. "Enough," he shouted. "You are all hunters for wealth and glory, and I was just trying to protect my name." Gray looked at him carefully. "Protect? From whom?" "From those who wanted to frame me as a murderer," Roger exclaimed. "I was the one who found the second room and wanted to tell the police, but they tried to stop me." "Then why did you hide the coin?" Gray asked. "Because I was afraid," Roger cried. "If the truth came out, I would lose everything." Sloane lowered his head. "Yes, I hid the coin," he admitted. "But I did not kill. I was afraid that everything would fall apart." Suddenly, Madame Muriel approached the fireplace. She bent down and picked up a small package that no one had noticed before. "Here's the proof," she said, handing the package to Gray. Inside were letters in which Mason detailed the intrigue that had been unfolding around the artifact: forgeries, blackmail, and theft of ancient artifacts, organized by a group to which Roger belonged. "It's all about money and power," Grace said, reading the lines aloud. Mason tried to stop them and sealed the coins so that no one could use the scarab's power. "Who was the killer then?" Joanna asked. "The one who knew that I would reveal the truth," Gray answered, looking at Dr. Hart. "You didn't come back to save us, but for revenge." Hart exhaled and lowered his head. "Yes," he admitted. "I wanted justice, but not murder." The police took him into custody. Gray looked around at everyone. "This whole story is a lesson for us. Secrets of the past can destroy the present if we allow fear to rule us." The snowstorm was dying down. The first rays of dawn were breaking through the windows of the mansion. "The truth is not a gift," he said. "It is a price." Chapter 10: The Beginning of a New Day. Dawn was slowly rising over the mansion, filling the rooms with a soft golden light. The snowstorm had died down, leaving behind a crystalline sheen of frost and a silence so quiet that it seemed as if nature itself was holding its breath. Gray stood by the large window in the living room, looking out at the deserted garden. His thoughts were heavy as stone, and at the same time, lighter. The secret that had tormented them all these days was revealed, but the price was high. Joanna entered the room, her face pale but calm. She put her hand on Gray's shoulder. "You are right," she said quietly. "The truth is not a gift, but perhaps it is the only thing that can set us free." Gray nodded. "Today we have lost not only friends," he said, "but also innocence. And now we must decide what to do with what remains." "What will happen to the mansion?" Joanna asked. "It should be a reminder," Gray answered. "A place where truth and mystery live side by side, and where people learn not to be afraid of their past." Lydia, standing in the doorway, suddenly began to cry. Gray came up to her and said quietly, "Sometimes admitting your mistakes is the first step to redemption." Somewhere there, in the heart of the desert, the shadows of the past retreated, giving way to the L. Lydia nodded and, wiping away her tears, smiled through them. "I hope Mason will find peace now." Suddenly the phone rang. It was the police captain. "All the documents have been handed over to the investigation," he said. "The coins and the pen have been destroyed. The expedition is closed." "Then the story ends," Grace said. "No," Joanna smiled. "It's just beginning." Grace smiled back. Taking Lydia's hand, he walked out into the street. The cold morning air filled his lungs, and a new hope ignited in his chest. "Every end has a beginning," he said out loud. The mansion, surrounded by the glow of dawn, seemed now not a place of curses, but a temple of truth and memory. And somewhere there, in the heart of the desert, the shadows of the past retreated, giving way to the light of a new day. Somewhere there, in the heart of the desert, the shadows of the past retreated, giving way to the